Hey guys, welcome to my latest video where we're going to be talking about the Chicago Bears offense in 2020. Before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel grow, and I hope you enjoy the video. So when we start talking about the Chicago Bears, there's only really one spot to start in, and that's Mitch Trubisky versus Nick Foles, the quarterback competition. So let's start with Trubisky. I'll work my way to Foles in a second. Trubisky last season was very disappointing. That's just what he was. He threw for 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. But after a 2018 where he made the Pro Bowl, threw for 24 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, people had really high hopes for him. They thought he could be an MVP kind of player. But last year, he just didn't live up to that hype. He was very disappointing on the football field. He didn't look comfortable. He missed a lot of throws. I mean, he was just a disappointing player on the field. Bears fans had a lot to hope for, and they just didn't see it last year. And he was part of the reason that Bears offense failed miserably last season. Now let's move to Nick Foles. Foles obviously is a veteran quarterback. He's been with the Eagles before he won a Super Bowl there, obviously. And he's been a guy that's been around the league. He's a journeyman quarterback. And he was brought in from the Jags for a late-round draft pick, not only because he has some familiarity with the coaching staff, but really just to push Mitch Trubisky and compete for that starting role. Now, I think that they will go with Mitch Trubisky. Bill Lazor obviously has coached Foles in the past. He has a link there to Foles. Lazor is the new offensive coordinator there in Chicago. However, I think that they will go with Trubisky. They've said it's going to be a clean slate. Matt Nagy's made that clear. However, I think they're going to roll with Mitch Trubisky. There's really no reason for them to not. Going into his fourth season, coming up to the end of his contract, he really needs to prove himself. Yes, they brought in Foles. I think he'll compete. I don't think he'll start for them. He'll be a guy, a veteran presence to help Trubisky grow. He'll allow for Trubisky to just feel more comfortable in that offense. I mean, Foles has been around the league for a while. He's been on a lot of teams. He's been in a lot of different situations. He knows how to help younger quarterbacks. I think this is really what they did. But if you look at Foles' contract, obviously it's still a big contract after he signed a huge 4-year deal with Jacksonville just a year ago. So they're going to bring him on not just as a mentor, but also they're going to want him to push Mitch Trubisky. They're going to want him to compete. But I think they will go with Trubisky in the beginning of the season. That said, if Trubisky completely nosedives at the beginning of the year, don't expect Foles not to just sit on the bench. He's going to start at some point if Trubisky just doesn't get going. So that's going to be the quarterback situation there. I did mention about Bill Lazor earlier. He's the new offensive coordinator there in Chicago. So I just want to gloss over this for a second. This offseason, the Bears and Matt Nagy kind of cleaned their offensive coaches up. They kind of hired some new guys. Obviously, Lazor is going to be the new offensive coordinator there. John DeFilippo is going to be the quarterback's coach. Juan Castillo is going to be the line coach. And tight ends coach Clancy Barone. Those are going to be the new offensive coaches there in Chicago under Matt Nagy. What Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy have made really clear is that last year, stuff just didn't work there in Chicago. That offense that was really good in 2018 just failed to do anything in 2019. And really what they're going to need to do is they're going to need a lot of offensive just genius there in Chicago and basically pull together as many ideas as possible to basically create the best game plan week in and week out and basically feed off each other. Nagy has made that clear in press conferences before. For example, at the draft combine, he basically spoke about that, about having basically he's got a lot of offensive genius in his offensive coaching room, and that's really just going to help that offense grow there. But for that offense to grow, those offensive weapons need to grow too. The Chicago Bears are famously known as a very run-heavy team. I mean, if you look at the past, obviously Walter Payton, Gale Sayers, and more recently, I guess, Matt Forte or Jordan Howard, Chicago Bears have really been a run-heavy organization. They're not known for throwing the ball downfield and making big plays like that. The run game is really what they need to focus on if they want to be better next year. They were one of the worst run teams last year in the NFL. They were in the bottom half of rushing the football. But even then, they just couldn't get that offensive line going. They couldn't get that run game going. And that's partially because of Matt Nagy's play calling. That's partially because of the O-line. It's just really the scheme just wasn't working. So let's talk about who those running backs are. Firstly, let's start with David Montgomery. Montgomery is going to be a second-year running back. Last year, he was there in Chicago, rushed for about 900 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He's going to be the main guy there in Chicago in that run game. He's a good back. He can make plays. He's just a solid guy that can really help out this offense. They also have Tariq Cohen, too. Tariq Cohen is kind of not a running back. He's kind of just everywhere on the field. He's more of a passing back, but he can still rush the football. I mean, he is a running back, but he's really utilized as a receiver. I mean, he had 79 receptions for 500 yards last season, just shy of 500 yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. So look for him more as a receiving back, and David Montgomery to really be that true running back there in Chicago. As I've said before, those Chicago teams are famous for running the football, and that's what they're going to need to do if they're going to want to get better next year. I think they were under 4 yards a carry on average as a team for running, which is absolutely horrendous. You're not going to move the ball at all if you can't run the football. So using the wide receivers now, I like this wide receiving core. It's a little bit underrated, but headlined by Allen Robinson, who was absolutely a star last season. I mean, this guy came out of his shell again. Obviously, in 2015, he was a Pro Bowler. He had 1,400 yards that season and 14 receiving touchdowns. His 14 receiving touchdowns that year led the league. But last year was his first year back to 1,000 receiving yards. He had 1,147 receiving yards, as well as 7 receiving touchdowns. And he also had 98 receptions, which was great for him. That's the most receptions he's ever had in his career. He became a really reliable and dependable target in that offense. And look for any aerial attack to revolve around him, especially in the red zone. He's a good red zone player. He can go up and catch the football, and that's what Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles is going to need him to do. They also have Anthony Miller. Miller kind of disappointed last year. A lot of people were expecting him to break out. I, being a fantasy owner, drafted him as a late-round flyer. I thought he would do well. He didn't end up doing that well. But what Miller is a solid player. He's a solid second wide receiver. I mean, last season he had 52 receptions for 656 yards, and that's kind of what he did. I mean, he wasn't that special, but he was just a vital player in that passing game that was basically a role player, and that helped Mitch Trubisky last year. He's going to help Nick Foles if he plays this year. He's going to be the second option there. They also picked up Ginn Jr., who is the definition of a journeyman wide receiver. I mean, he's been all over the NFL, and he might not have as much speed as he used to have, but he can still stretch the field, and he's still a good veteran guy to have on that team. Last year in New Orleans, he had 420 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns, so he still has a little bit left in the tank. Now I want to move on to the tight ends. The tight ends, I think, are going to be a staple in this offense. I know that other teams that have had multiple good tight ends in the past have utilized something called 12 personnel, which is basically 2 tight ends and a wide receiver and a running back as a staple of their offense. I mean, if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they do that occasionally with guys like Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. But I think the Bears could be a team that could utilize the 12 personnel next year. Firstly, I'm going to start with Cole Kmet. They drafted him in the second round this year, and they're very high on him. Last year at Notre Dame, he had 515 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. As I said, the Bears like him a lot, and I think they're going to use him a lot too. So that's going to be probably their tight end 1, if not their tight end 2. Their other tight end is going to be Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham is obviously a veteran tight end. He's been in the league for a while, probably 10 years at this point. He's made a few Pro Bowls, been on the All-Pro teams before. He's just a really good guy. In the past, maybe 3 or 4 years, he hasn't been that great. He's really struggled to get going, especially in Green Bay. He just couldn't find his former self there. Last year, he had 447 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. But even then, he's still a dependable option. And if the Bears are going to look to use this 12 personnel look that I've talked about a little bit before, I mean, having Kmet and Graham, who are both good tight ends that can make plays in the receiving game and the passing game, are going to be really, really great for them. However, the thing that really needs to improve is that offensive line. Last year, that offensive line just was really, really bad. I mean, that's what it was. They have Charles Leno Jr. up there, James Daniels, Cody Whitehair. They got Jermaine Ifedi. They signed him as a free agent this offseason. And they also have Bobby Massey there. I mean, this O-line was pretty bad last year. They're going to need to improve if they want to run the football, if they want to keep their quarterback protected, if they want to open up that aerial attack. They're just going to need that O-line to be better. Matt Nagy cannot expect another year last year where that O-line just wasn't working. And for that O-line to work, they're going to need it to work because without that O-line working, that offense isn't going to work either. So really, really look for that O-line to really take that next step next year, because if they don't, I don't think this Bears offense is going to be any better than it was last year. And to say that again, last year they were really horrendous. So what I've seen a lot in just interviews and stuff with the Bears coaching staff is they really want versatility. They want to be able to do a lot on the football field offensively. And the thing is, they have guys that can do that. They have Tariq Cohen, they have David Montgomery, they have Allen Robinson, they have the former speed demon, Ted Ginn. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. But they have a lot of versatile players that can play all over the football field. And the thing is, Matt Nagy's play calling really needs to step up next year. He brought in all these offensive coaches, offensive minds to basically help cook up a great offensive scheme there in Chicago. I've already suggested a little bit of 12 personnel. Maybe that's a look they go to, but I think for them to be successful, they need to run the football. All the great Chicago Bears teams have been able to run the football. So really look for that. And I think next season, don't expect the Bears to be a top 20 offense. But last year, they weren't a top 20 offense. They were one of the worst offenses in the league. But look for them to improve a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky there at quarterback for the most of the year. I think it will be Trubisky to start the year. But with new offensive minds in that coaching room, I think they're going to cook up an offense that will help elevate this Bears offense and make this team better than it was last year. I mean, they were very defense-heavy oriented team last year. They have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and that was the only reason they won 8 games last year. So really look for this offense to take the next step, and if this offense does take the next step, don't be surprised if the Bears end up making the playoffs in 2020.
Now that you've reached the end of my video, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it helps my channel out, and check out my other videos on my channel. Also, you can follow my Instagram, the link is in the description down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, see ya.